Okay. Okay, so welcome I see there is someone viewing and hopefully more people will join in. This is a Getting Ready for Grants workshop with Stephen Ussery from Stewards Unlimited. And I'll give Stephen a chance we'll be able to give a better, background on the work that they do. But really, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys support farmers, producers, distributors, nonprofits in writing grants, researching grants, business plan development, strategic planning. You guys do a lot of work, but today we're focusing on grants and what grants are available for small farmers and kind of what you need to have in place to apply for this. So a few housekeeping things before we get started. Let's see, Stephen is going to talk for about 40-ish minutes. This is going to be a little bit presentation based, and then we'll open it up for questions in the last 15-ish minutes. So please put your questions in the chat, and I will be looking at those, and at the end, I'll read them out loud, and so everybody can hear them, and Stephen can answer them that way. So questions in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm saying chat, but it's actually the comments box in Facebook. So, okay, questions in the comments box. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that Stewards Unlimited, in celebration of this, is going to do a $50 gift card to a winner. So if you're interested in seeing if you can win that gift card, you should go to the Stewards Unlimited Facebook page after this is over and follow their instructions to try and win that gift card. And tag your friends, share your friends, and spread the word about that. And I think that's it. I'll turn it over to you, Stephen, and let you jump in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. Am I able to share my screen here? Are you able to see this?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, again, thank you so much, Natalie. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit more about grant writing for small farms. I'll go a little bit more into why I think this is important, but I really appreciate Tennessee Local Food and your organization, what you do, the summit. I'm really excited to hear more about the summit happening in December, right? And so obviously, anybody joining here today should already be at least a little bit aware, but just to promote that a little bit more and express how honored I am to be invited to share, and excited I am to see great organizations like yours investing in local food. So I'm excited to be a part of this. So as Natalie said, my name is Stephen Ussery. I'm the founder of Stewards Unlimited LLC. And today we're going to be talking about grant writing for small farms, a very fun topic. So as a brief disclaimer before I get too far into it, the presentation slides are going to be made available after this webinar, so feel free to listen, brainstorm. Don't worry about getting down all the specific details. After this, I'm going to be sending out an Excel document and a Word document that has a list of a lot of different funding opportunities. So I'm going to run through some of them pretty quickly today. Don't try to get all the details down. Don't try to write them down. You're going to get them afterwards. So think about how it might apply for your business, and just kind of like go on the journey with me. And as always, the best advice is going to be tailored to your individual circumstance. I'm going to be doing some broad strokes today, but always happy to chat more and give you kind of a more refined understanding for how they might apply for your business. So for a presentation outline, we're going to talk about why funding is important. We're going to talk about some specific grants that I would recommend you look a little bit closer at. Talk about how grants fit into a larger funding strategy, how you can start acting on them today, and then how after you've used them to continue to leverage them. And then I'll tell you a little bit more about us as well. I believe adamantly that farmers provide a valuable social service. This is why Stewards Unlimited was started. We think that good farmers who take seriously their duties as stewards of creation and of their land's inheritors contribute to the welfare of society in more ways than society usually acknowledges or even knows, by Wendell Berry, big fan. But Stewards Unlimited came out as kind of two levels of stewardship, right? I do believe that farmers are stewards of creation, and I want to support the people who are stewarding it in a way that I think is really valuable. And I find that oftentimes smaller scale operations, family farms, they really take that responsibility very seriously. I also believe that many times these farmers need help with the business side. Maybe they're really good at taking care of the land and their animals, but that doesn't leave them much time to do the business side. And so we become stewards of our clients, who we believe are also stewards. Lots of stewardship going on here. But that's how we got into this and why we do what we do. I think that farmers deserve better. Small farmers are the backbone of America. And like I said, usually they care more about their land, their animals, communities, more than they do about maximizing profit. And so a lot of the time, I've spent a lot of time talking to people who wish that they had more time for developing their farm, being able to roll out new products, maybe engage with local markets. They want to invest in the health of their land and their animals. They want to mentor other young farmers instead of just having to focus on whatever's going to make the most money to just keep them afloat, and wanting to engage with others in their community. And so that's when we started, and we've seen over time that grants really can help. And so oftentimes grants are focused on increasing profitability, increasing your customer base, and helping you expand to new product offerings. And so a couple examples, we've worked with Ranelou Dairy for the past 3 years, and they've been able to get over $500,000 through this one specific program, the Dairy Business Innovation Program, just 3 years in a row. In their second year of farming, Riverview Farms was able to develop a new pork product, and they're able to get $50,000. Young farm, but they were still able to be competitive for grants for these new products. Another example is the Path Company. We were able to get them awarded $500,000 for things like renewable energy. So they were able to build renewable energy arrays on a couple of, they did like wastewater treatment. And so they were able to help their community in that way. But there's lots of different avenues, lots of different ways that they can build in and build the capacity of your organization. I wanted to go over a couple specific grants that I think you should be on your radar. First, we'll talk a bit about federal grants. So I have 3 that I want to touch on, and then of course there are way more, but 3 that I think everybody should really be able to consider today. The first one is my favorite grant. I give a lot of talks about the value-added producer grant. It is just, the number one, easiest one, I think, for a lot of people to use within their business. It's focused on increasing producer revenue and increasing producer customer base. And so they actually have priorities for small and mid-sized family farms. You also get priority points if you're a beginning farmer, which means you farmed for under 10 years, if you have veteran status, if you are owned by a socially disadvantaged group, so either a minority or woman-owned business, you get extra points in the grading of it. It's open to a lot of people, but you just get priority points if you have any of those things. Depending on the level where you're at, that's pretty flexible. They have both planting grants, which means that all you have to do is own a commodity, right? So like you grow tomatoes in your garden, and that's a commodity that you could then apply for a planting grant to say, I want to explore a new value-added product, like making salsa or making, hot sauce or something. And you can get a grant that can help you plan. So get a business plan together, hire a marketing team, be able to develop a brand. That is a great opportunity for a lot of people. What I more commonly do is the working capital grant, which is the second option. And this is just like money in your pocket, right? Because money can be used for purchasing additional commodities. So if you are a rancher, say, and you process 51 head of cattle each year into meat cuts, and then you sell them at the farmer's market, the grant can help you buy an additional 49 head at the processor ready to be processed, right? So it can't buy like the calves and then you raise them, but it can buy the commodity that's ready to be processed, which is huge, right? That's an incredible alleviation of cash flow on your part. It can also pay for the processing to have them processed into meat cuts. It can pay for packaging and shipping costs, your postage fees to actually mail them to any clients. It can hire a marketing contractor in order to do a marketing campaign. It's these are things that most people are already spending money on, right? You're already paying for things to be processed. And so this is a cost share. So it's a 50% program, which means that you can get up to half of your money offset by the grant program. And so if you pay $100,000 in processing each year, then you can apply and get a grant for 50,000 of that to be reimbursed to you through the grant. The grants go up to $250,000, which means that it would need to be a $500,000 project over 1 to 3 years, which, especially if you work in livestock, is not that much. But it can be anywhere from 1 or 2,000 all the way up to the $250,000 mark. The value added producer grant, one of the best for your first application. It's a bit more comprehensive, but we've developed a really good process for it. And we oftentimes we use as a first way to engage with clients, because we really get to know their business. We work on a financial piece with them. So we know how to tell the story of the budget, work on the narrative pieces, and everything is really developed then that can be repurposed for other grants as well. So it's just cash in your pocket, right? You're already spending the money. It's just a way to recoup some of those expenses rather than needing to go out and do something extra. The REAP grant, which we'll talk about shortly, is it can help you build something like solar panels. But if a solar array costs $20,000, that still requires you to invest 10,000 of your own, which may not be realistic for many farmers, because cash flow is one of the biggest issues for a lot of agricultural organizations. So that's why this is probably my favorite and easiest for your first application. You don't have to have large reserves of cash on hand in order to be competitive for it. Ideally, you start working on this way before it's due. It's probably going to be due in February of next year. I think I had a typo in the slide, but the next one should be in February of next year is when it would be due. I'm working on, I think, 5 or 6 of them right now with people, though, because they're fairly predictable what they're going to look like, and you're able to work on them far in advance. Another program is the Rural Energy for America program, the REAP. This has 2 different options. Either it can fund something like a renewable energy system. So think of this as solar panels. You can put up a wind turbine. You can put in an anaerobic digester, something that's going to generate energy. Or it can be an energy efficiency improvement, which means that you can, as long as you're replacing equipment, you can buy something new that's more energy efficient. I'll see a good example of this is something like a grain dryer. If you have a grain dryer, you can buy a new one that's almost always, you're gonna have a 20-year-old grain dryer. If you buy something newer, it's going to be more energy efficient. And then as long as you're decreasing your energy use, this can be a cost share for up to 50%. You're not able to expand production, right? So you couldn't just put in another one and then continue to also use your old one. There is some rules there, but as long as you're replacing it, then you can offset the cost of some pretty large agricultural equipment. This is also a particularly good time to apply for the REAP. They just changed the rules. They just put a lot more money into it. A lot of times grants work off of scoring, which is not the most fun, but like they score it, right? The REAP is a formula, and so you can know what your score is going to be when you submit it. You used to need to have a 72 score in order to be awarded, but last application, people were getting awarded as low as 42. And so it means that even if it's not as competitive of an application, right now is a really good time to apply for it, because there's just a lot more money, and so they're making a lot more rewards. They have up to $1 million per grant, so you can have a $2 million solar installation project, right? That's out of the range of most people, but it just shows it doesn't all have to be on your location. It can be across multiple locations. So it really is whatever kind of project you could imagine, this can help match you. Usually it'll cover just 50% of the project costs. So if you want to have a $50,000 grant, you also need to contribute 50,000. And so this is that dynamic that I was talking about with the value added, where a lot of grants, if you're doing something new and it has a 50% cost share, you have to have that $50,000, or you have to have access to financing, which is very possible. There are a lot of financing options for this type of thing, like on the state level, on the county level, there are really low interest loans and tax rebates for renewable energy. And so usually you can get that pretty low, but it still requires a little bit of extra effort. The last one on the federal level I'll highlight today is the National Resource Conservation Service. NRCS oftentimes is the first place I point small farms if I'm unable to work with them, because it's kind of like the lowest level of effort, right? Like they will come, oftentimes they will come out to your farm, they'll visit you, they'll help you look and make a plan about what kinds of conservation activities you could do. And then the paperwork is fairly simple. I've heard of people helping to fill out the paperwork. They'll do things like building a hoop house, putting up fencing for your animals, helping install irrigation systems, maybe do drainage. A lot of things, it has to tie back into conservation, but there's a lot of overlap, right? And these are things that a lot of people need, especially when you're on the smaller side, you're just getting started. NRCS, they do want to see that you are already a farmer. They want to see that you're already producing something, you're already doing something. Maybe you've sold something and you can kind of show it, but they'll come out and help you actually kind of figure out what you want to do. The level of support does depend a lot on your local office. I've seen some that are stellar, go above and beyond, and I've also seen some where it's hard to get a response. And so unfortunately there is some variation there, but I would definitely recommend reaching out to them today, right? And just starting that conversation. Here are a couple of regional grant programs. We've got the SDBII and the SARE. The SDBII, that's the one that I mentioned with Ranlu. They have several different, I think they have like maybe 4 or 5 different grant programs through this institute. The one that's particularly applicable right now is they have a dairy business planning grant. And so it's a grant for up to $30,000. There's no match required. And so you don't have to put in any money of your own. You just have to have a plan of how you would use the 30,000. The grants are going to be due mid-October, and you can be a new business. You don't have to be a dairy producer. You can just be a processor, right? So if you've always wanted to, buy milk from a local producer and make your own yogurt or make ice cream, that is eligible for this. And so you can apply for a grant to look a little bit deeper into the feasibility, come up with a business plan, help work with a marketer to develop a brand. It's funding for that kind of thing to help develop that new industry. There's also the SARE, Southern Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education. They have several different competitive research grants. I don't think of myself as a researcher, but most farmers are, because you're doing trials, right? So you're trying out different types of cover crops. You're trying out different ways of doing things to see which method for pest management works the best. And this does fund that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to be from an university or some high level academic research. It's more figuring out through trials what works the best. So 2 in particular, they have, I think, maybe up to 10 different grants. 2 that are particularly relevant. There's the Professional Development Program grants, which are due in about a week. And this actually is more for people who work with agricultural producers. So Natalie, this might even be something that would be good for you in your role, because there might be something in there that, because you're working with farmers and you're working within local food, there's like professional development funding there for you. And then the producer grants are likely to be due in November of 2023. And those are more, you want to do trials for cover cropping, or you want to do trials for just to see what's going to work the best on your farm. Okay, now Tennessee grant programs. Let me tell you, there are a lot. I picked out 4 here. We've got the Agricultural Enterprise Fund. So this is for increasing farm income, access to market, increasing capacity, spurring agricultural innovation. So this grant will only cover 25% of a project, but they don't mention a limit. So this may actually be a bit larger. They tend to want to promote value added in processing. And so it's more like if you're working with several different agricultural organizations, or if you have something in mind where you'd be able to buy produce from other people or engage with others, that's probably a better fit for this one. But because there's no limit mentioned, this can really be a pretty substantial project. And this funding can be used as part of the match for other programs, which really can make it so that, if you use this for, you can't use this for 50, but as an example, use this for 25%, use something like the value to producer grant, and then that reduces the amount that you would need to pay out of pocket, right? You do have to have something like a business plan, proof of financing. They want to see that you're serious. Usually they'll do in July of each year, but this would be a really good option for anybody that's kind of in that mid-tier value. The next one is the Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program. This one is really approachable. They want to do everything good for farms, maximizing farm profits, changing market situations, efficiency. They have a whole list. These the programs. They have dairy solutions, herd health, a lot of different things. So most people can find themselves in one of these categories. The one that I've highlighted here is producer diversification. I find that a lot of the farms that I work with, especially right now, are looking into things like agritourism, and agritourism fits into this producer diversification category. And so this is a good option if you're looking to explore doing more of that. How do you get a little bit to get off the ground? This application is October 1st to the 7th, and so it's pretty soon. Funding goes up to 12,000. Each of the different programs has a different limit. I think 12,000 was the highest, and so some of them are lower than that. But I want to say producer diversification was the 12, and then it has a 50% cost share, right? So you can apply for 12,000, and then you would have to provide 12,000 of the value. But oftentimes you can provide that match in labor. You can provide it in something like commodities. You can provide it in other ways. It's not just cash out of your pocket, oftentimes. This might be a good time to mention, because that one is probably piques the interest of a lot of people. Most grants will have a list of allowable and unallowable expenses. And so it is very important. That's the thing that a lot of people get tripped up on, is they'll either try to use the grant funding for something that's not allowable because it's not within, a lot of grant programs don't want to pay for construction, right? And so if you apply for a grant to do construction, you just get disqualified immediately. And so that would be the thing that I would watch out for here with the agritourism, but always happy to help you dive into it a little bit deeper and understand it. Another one is the farm cost share program. This one seems also maybe a little bit larger. I think the funding, the minimum is 25,000, I want to say. So you do have to have a project that's a little bit larger, but this helps pay for things like construction, materials, installation, right? And so that's rare. You hardly ever see that on a federal level. It's because this is a state level program. They specifically want to address things that were revealed because of the pandemic, but this would be a good option if you're looking to build something, right? So, and if you're going to build something, you're probably spending more than $25,000. So it's more of that bigger investment, right? How do you get the grant to help offset some of those really big costs? Lastly, the Pick Tennessee Products, a great program in order for you to kind of do sharing marketing. You can apply, they have a logo that you can add to your products. They can do some marketing for you, including things like putting you on their website, makes you more accessible, easier to find for people who want to support Tennessee, and just a good community overall. Applications are accepted anytime, so it's really a great program to check out and see if you would qualify. I do want to say that grants are not a short-term solution. So free money is never free. Everybody, I get a lot of people come to me and they're like, I want my free money. But the allure of free money really can pull you away from your primary focus. So if you're spending a lot of time focusing on grants and like trying to, I can get money to do this, you can get pulled away doing this when really what you want to do is this. So it's a strategic move. It's not always the best fit for your business. Even with a lot of grant money, there's a lot of time involved. You almost always you have to match it somehow. So some of them you don't have to match with money, but you're always going to have reporting. You're always going to have like red tape and bureaucracy that you have to deal with. So there always is an opportunity cost, right? That you're spending time pursuing and managing a grant instead of doing something else that may be better for your business. So it's not exactly free. I like to think of grant writing as very similar to business planning. Usually, most grants, it's the same pieces, right? You have to explain what your need is. You have to explain what your market is, what the grant project, how it will address a problem or a need. You have to have a very specific budget for it. And then you say, what are going to be the impacts of this grant? So if you give me this money, like my profitability will go up by this much. I will gain this many new customers. I will it is very logical and formulaic in a lot of ways, very similar to a business plan. So they also have like these other priorities, right? Most grant programs, they want to promote energy sovereignty within the US, right? Or they want to promote the organic industry within the US. They have goals, and you need to show them how your grant project accomplishes their goals rather than just moving your business forward. And so you have to understand your business well enough to say what helps me and also helps this person who has the grant funding that's available. There were quite a few COVID-19 grants that didn't follow this, and it was really like just giving money away. There's a lot that happened during COVID-19. That's not regular. So people who did like the PPP program or other grants, unfortunately, that's not the standard. The level is much, much higher for most grants. I'll also take a moment to say that any questions that anybody has, please put into the chat. We'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. With this in mind, preparation really is key. Some grants are annual and don't change too much. Most grants, you have 30 to 90 days to apply. They announce it and they say, all right, the application is due 2 months from now. They don't have it just accepted anytime. We are a professional service, and it takes us more than a month to go through a grant application with people, right? This is not something that usually you can just crank out in a day. It takes a lot of time and thought. And so a lot of people don't hear about the opportunity until it's right before it's due. They have to rush. And then, if it happens during the summertime, during the busiest time for most farmers, even if you hear about it, a lot of people won't consider pursuing it because, if it's the timing is off, or if your daughter has a wedding, right? There's just other things that are happening. So being responsive when they open is not a good strategy. You have to be looking ahead to what is going to be coming out and preparing ahead of time. And that helps you to understand your longer term strategy. So looking ahead in time, preparing that plan, knowing where you are and how you want to develop your business is really the key to taking advantage of most grant programs. When you start, it does get easier over time. Very, very few farms that I work with have any of their operations written down. They don't understand what their operating costs are. They never cut themselves a check, right? Like people are working and they're just keeping up. They don't have an idea of who are trusted collaborators, what resources are in their area. A lot of information is in the heads of one or two people, right? Kind of like the business owner who just works 80 hours a week. And, if they were to get sick or incapacitated, then, there's really not that good of a chance that people would be able to cover the gaps. I find that writing things down makes review easier as well. A lot of our work is just getting people to write things down or rewrite them down for people. That really exposes gaps, right? So we find out that owners, they haven't been recording or tracking their time. And so by having to actually start writing it down, they're forced to, and then they realize, wow, I'm spending a lot of time over on this product, like with my chickens, and I'm not making very much money over here, but I spend a very small amount of time on, our beef, and we make a really good return over there. So maybe I should alter where I'm spending my time in order to kind of focus on where the most profitable activities are. Different staff may be doing things in inconsistent ways. We've seen a lot of times when you write things down and have your operational goal, you can really standardize. Everybody's on the same page. It creates consistency. It also makes it easier for third parties to review, and they're impartial. So having somebody like me, having somebody like the SBDC, Small Business Development Center, having other, like, many times free services that are willing to help you in your business, they can read through what you're doing and be able to give feedback, because you've put the work into communicating and cataloging. Makes your budget far more accurate. Also, like I said, leads to more sustainability in your business. You understand where you're spending your time, where you're making money, and it also helps you integrate ideas like succession planning, right? And so how do we actually pass this on to the next generation? Is it worth bringing on more people? And you can make much more strategic decisions. To that end, a lot of times we spend time with people doing things like enterprise specific financial analysis, looking at what are your costs, what's your revenue look like, and like, are you making money? Doing things like business plans, feasibility studies, looking at your market, where's your niche, what can you grow in, standard operating procedures. So if you brought a new employee on, and you wanted them to be able to start working within a week, what do you tell them how to do? Like, what do you give them to help them understand what their responsibilities are? And then content libraries for telling your farm story, doing your marketing, things like that. Where are those, like, instead of having to remake every time you sit down to do something like a social media post, instead of having to remake everything each time, do you have a kind of a body of work that you can pull from in order to make it easier and sometimes automate a lot of that kind of stuff? After that, usually we'll brainstorm. We'll see, we understand where you are, where do you want to go? That's a process that I really enjoy, and thinking about, all right, understanding where you are, what's profitable, where do we want to go? Do you want to maximize your flock size, get a bigger herd? Do you want to bring in new breeds? Do you want to do value-added products? As a side note, value-added products usually seems like there's a huge overlap with a lot of grants that are available for things like value-added products. Two, it oftentimes is where your average farmer is able to get a lot more profitability. And so figuring out a good value-added product that fits in with the amount of production that you want to do, that that you would be able to kind of create a brand, create a market for it, do direct to consumer sales. That's very common. And I see a lot of people have a lot of success with that, particularly on the small farm side. But more you have everything written down, more you can do all this, right? So that's usually where it starts. Materials oftentimes are then also easily reused. First grant's the worst. You don't have any idea what your finances look like in many cases. You don't understand grant language, business talk, all that. First one is always the biggest hurdle. After that, so much easier. You have good budget numbers. You understand your market. You have like a write-up of a lot of things, and then you can just continue to reuse it. And so that's usually what we'll do, is we'll work with somebody on maybe a little bit of a harder one on the first one, because it's like pulling teeth, but you get all the hard stuff out of the way, and then you're able to continue to apply for some of the smaller ones without a significant investment of time. Also, growing your local network pays off. So when you start talking to people like NRCS, FSA, the Farm Service Agency, your Rural Development Office from the USDA, maybe people like from the Small Business Development Center, shout out to the one in Chattanooga. I've been working with them for a long time, and so Josh has been very helpful over there. If anybody's in the Chattanooga area, definitely would recommend. But you form these relationships, and then you're top of mind, and they are able to reach out to you when they hear about new opportunities. A lot of grants, they don't want to support one farmer, one person. They want to see collaborative efforts. They want to see, how does this project benefit you and other producers, right? And so if you understand the common challenges that people are facing, there's an opportunity to collaborate and find a solution that helps multiple people, especially by working with people like the Tennessee Local Food. bringing them in on a grant, right? And being able to apply that they see a lot of common problems, and you can do one thing that helps everybody together. That's very, very common. There are lots of other funding opportunities that I'm not mentioning here. They vary pretty widely. Developing new products, investing in land and animals, mentoring, engaging with community research, that kind of thing. Right now, I see a lot of emphasis on local food systems, right? There's things like the local food promotion program, the farmers market promotion program, there's regional food programs. There's a lot for connecting farms to institutions. And so with COVID, there was a big disruption, and people have kind of realized that local food is much more resilient. And so there's this effort to try to formalize and develop more aggregation on a small local scale, where there can be aggregation of local farms that would then serve as the point of connection with institutions. So how do we get hospitals, right, to source their food locally? How do we get schools to source food locally instead of working with these huge companies that are carting food in from halfway across the US? There's also a large emphasis on improving nutrition, so particularly within things like schools. And then climate smart agriculture is a big one too. So that's both conservation, but then also kind of a newer idea that isn't incredibly well defined, but reducing carbon emissions, that kind of thing. So those, are some programs that are really popular right now. There are lots of granting organizations. So I've given a lot from the USDA. There's things like the NRCS. There are state agencies, the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. There's also like economic development corporations usually that have just things like how many people do you train, and we can do tax rebates for that kind of thing. There are city and county governments. There are national and local private organizations like the Veterans Coalition. They're just a private foundation that they have grants for veteran farmers. So there are a whole host. Usually the problem is not that there aren't any options. The problem is more just that there are a lot, and understanding which ones can you qualify for, which ones are a good fit, right? Which ones are actually worth the effort that you could be competitive enough for. Navigating all of this is pretty complex. That's usually what we focus on. We do have a list. If like for anybody who wants to take a look, we do have lists. We send out alerts on a weekly basis of like, hey, here are grants. We break them down across 4 different categories. We have them for producers, people who are actually creating a commodity, whether it's like ranching, growing tomatoes, row crops, market garden, anything like that. If you're producing, that's one category. If you are a mid-tier value chain, so if you do any kind of processing, aggregation, anything within like between the producer and the end market, that's another category. We have them for researchers. So if you're doing any kind of academic or private research, and then we also have them for technical service providers. So that's like your nonprofits who are either doing education around food production, nutrition. It could be people like myself who provide professional services, business planning, any of that kind of stuff is a 4th category. That's the most common. There's the most in that category, but it's also like kind of the widest ranging, right? But we have lists of all these. We put them out weekly. It's free. We're doing the work anyways with the people that we're currently working with, so we make it available just to create awareness. So feel free, go to our website, sign up for it. And we're working on a survey so that you would only receive ones that we already have vetted for you. We're figuring out the best way to actually do that right now. For now, it's more like the clients that we work with, and we know we have a better understanding of their business. We reach out specifically when there are ones that we know would be a good fit for them. Grants don't cover everything. The way that I usually view it is that if you're already spending money in one area of your business, even if you don't need a grant for that area, if you can get a grant to cover that money you would have spent, that frees up money to be spent in other areas. So I'm very money in is money in. Doesn't matter where it comes into your business. And so even if you're looking to build a building and there's not a good grant option for it, there may be a way to offset some of your labor costs through something like a grant, and then that money you would have spent on labor you could then put towards the building, right? And so even if there's not a great fit for exactly what you're looking for, there's probably a way to bring money into your business. And then you can have a strategic approach there. So we did also prepare a Tennessee specific resource list. Tennessee Local Food saw that, they were excited about the idea of having something specific for Tennessee. So we developed something, I think I counted 44 opportunities for both Tennessee at large. And then we did write-ups about 4 major cities. So I think it was Nashville, Memphis, Knoxville, and Chattanooga. Even though Chattanooga might not be major, but that's where I'm at. So gotta represent. Including like the ones in Nashville are for Nashville and Davidson County. And so it's going to be available on the Tennessee Local Food website. We're going to send it out after this, I believe. We'll make it available. It doesn't go through all the opportunities, even probably locally available. Definitely doesn't do the federal or regional options. There are a lot more, but it's something to like look at and start thinking about. I would encourage people, like Natalie said, we are having kind of like a giveaway, right? And so we're trying to grow our social media following. We're posting all these alerts. We want to make sure that people are exposed to them. So anybody that likes and follows our social media, and then comments on a post that we have about the giveaway will be entered in to win a $50 gift card. We'll be doing that at the end of this month. So it gives you about a week to tag friends to get extra entries, and then for them to enter as well. We would love for this resource to be shared widely. Even if I never talk to you directly or we never work together, I really think that these are valuable resources. And most grants, the way it goes, if the year goes by and there's still money left in the grant, then they think, oh, well, people don't want this money, right? And so then they don't put as much money into it. I really like, storming the gates with grants like this, because then they say there's a huge demand for this money. We need more, right? And then they fund more of them in the future. So I'm a big fan of, even if it's slightly more competition, having maximized as many people applying as we can, because then that'll show that this is an important thing that the government should continue to invest in. A little bit about Stewards Unlimited. We help farmers get funding. We identify new funding opportunities. We help you design competitive proposals which help your farm's goals, and then we win funding through actually developing the proposal and doing project management for the process. We've become a bit of a one-stop shop resource for a lot of our clients who they don't want to interact with 10 different people who do different things. And so a lot of our work ends up being finding other resources for people as well, helping connect them with marketers, bookkeepers, things like that, and helping just professionalize a lot of the business that might have been, it started small, but now you're starting to get to a size where you need outside support in order to continue to grow. So for next steps, hello. So you've already done the hardest part, right? Seeking new information. Your time is very valuable. And so, sitting and listening to this is a big contribution. So again, thank you for your time. I would say next step is check out my website, look at the Facebook, look at these resources, get a copy of them. We will continue to update them over time, but get a copy today and just look at them and see what you think. Do any jump out to you? Feel free to reach out to me directly. We have a contact form through Facebook, anything like that. I'm happy to have a consultation call with anybody and kind of talk through these ones in particular for your business. How do they fit in, and kind of point you in the right direction for next steps. And then we like allowing our clients to focus on their businesses with support from people who take responsibility for your growth. So back to the idea of stewardship. So thank you so much for your time. I think I might have gone a little bit over 45. We're cutting close. But yeah, thank you so much. Here's a QR code for our contact form. Here's all my information. I would love to chat more with you about your particular case. So I'll turn it back over to you, Natalie. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. That was so informative. There were so many great things. I definitely have a few questions myself. And yeah, thank you so much also for being willing to share your knowledge and your resources, not just here today, but through this awesome resource page that you've created for us here in Tennessee. I mean, how valuable and special. So thanks for doing that. I can't wait to share that. And yes, we will put that on our website, and we will be sending an email newsletter out soon. So if you're subscribed to our newsletter, we'll make sure that we include that. And you have a link to see all that information. And you mentioned, Stephen, that is this an email newsletter that you said that we can subscribe for Stewards Unlimited to get these opportunities, grant opportunities? Okay.
Yes. So it's an email. Long term, we want it to be where you take a survey and you kind of tell us, I'm an organic producer, I raise chickens, I'm in this county. And then we would automatically filter, and we'd say we would only send you ones that are relevant for people that are in that county, or you wouldn't get random grants. We haven't gotten quite that far. Right now, we just have a general list that has pretty much all the ones that we're coming across each week. And so it's a little bit longer. It takes a little bit more work to understand if you're relevant, but by scanning through it, you can at least see if there's any that like really clearly fit. And the idea is that you get it on a weekly basis. And then if there's one that you think might fit, you reach out to us and we're happy to chat about, yes, this is probably a good fit for you. You should look at it a little bit closer.
Cool. Okay, so everyone should definitely sign up for that. And so we've had some people watching, but we have one question in the chat. So I'm going to ask this one, and then I have some questions too. We have a question: what are costs like to work with your organization on grant applications? That's
a great question, and one that I probably won't answer very directly on a recorded line. We do flat fees based on effort. We do them upfront, right? So there are two common methods for grant writers. The more common is a percentage of the award, right? And so somebody might say, like, we want 10% of whatever the award is in order for us to work with you. You're not able to include the cost of hiring a grant writer in the budget of a grant. And so if that was possible, I might consider doing something like that. What I usually see, though, is that it's a really high percentage. It's a lot more expensive to do a percentage of award than what we charge. And so we do flat fees up front. We get a small deposit before we even start working together, because we've had a couple bad experiences where people, they get overwhelmed. It's a lot of work to do these grants. And, they kind of like back out halfway through when we've already spent a lot of time. So we do a small deposit up front, and then we do the second deposit after we're done. But it depends on what the grant is and how long we've been able to work together, if you already have a business plan or if we're making stuff from scratch. And so it really does depend. I'm happy to chat about any particular program. If you wanted to reach out at my email, I'm happy to look at kind of what you already have, what you'd be interested in applying for, and giving you a specific number that it would cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you talked about having your recording everything, writing everything down, having your operations recorded so that you really have a tangible business plan and a way that your operation is running. So I'm just kind of saying that out loud again, that that would be a good place to start, would you say, for a farmer? Like, start there, and then like whenever they come to you, you guys aren't having to start from scratch. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I would also say that probably the number one thing is the budget. So we can catch up and kind of like interview people, and that's oftentimes what we're doing for a lot of grants. We have just a couple calls where we interview people and we ask them questions. They kind of ramble at us, and then we're writing down what they say, and then we know what the grant needs, and so we're able to then ask follow-up questions and kind of like draw out the information we need. Most people can talk about what they do pretty easily, right? Because they do it, they can just kind of ramble off the top of their head. What most people can't do is help come up with their budget numbers very quickly. And so that is the number one thing that for people to be getting ahead of, just understanding, right? Keep your receipts. If you use QuickBooks, start working with a bookkeeper, or if you can do it yourself, do that, but be recording everything, right? Keep your business expenses separate than your personal expenses. And so there's a lot of business concepts in there, but basically, if you can understand all of the expenses that go into something like a value added product, I can help you. A lot of times I still help people go through that where they don't have a great idea, but I kind of know what the expenses are going to be. And it's just kind of like a laundry list of, all right, go get me a receipt for this, go get me a receipt, and we'll start to compile it. But that is the number one thing. And we have templates for that kind of thing. Happy to share if you want to reach out. Just basic budgeting, Excel sheets. There's tons of templates online. You can get them from any, like the Small Business Development Center. They can help you do that kind of thing as well. So it's just overwhelming a lot of times. So it's more like starting small. And I would definitely say if you don't already have a separate bank account for your farm, try to separate them, right? So like your farm income should not be going into your personal money, right? And then being spent. Personal expenses and business expenses should be kept separate as much as they can, because then you can also just look at your business bank account, and that's a great start to understand what your budget looks like.
Yeah. So a farmer that comes to you with a clear breakdown of their expenses and how that falls, it's maybe it would be a little less expensive for them to hire you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Potentially.
usually. Yeah.
Okay. So if anybody else has any questions, I know there's some others watching, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I'm going to ask my question, which is, was it the TAEP grant that you said, or are there other grants? You mentioned that not all of the matches have to be cash, meaning like the value of your commodities. I mean, how else can you kind of, if cash flow is tight, then what are some other options that how can you work that match?
Yeah. So there's the two most common types of match are either cash match or in kind. And so anything that you contribute as an in-kind match still has to be eligible for grant funding, if that makes sense. So it's like if you're not allowed to use construction as a grant expense, if you can't use the grant to build something, then you can't say, well, I'm going to build this building and that's my match. It has to be the same types of expenses. Oftentimes, though, things like the value added producer grant, you can use 25% of your match as owner labor. And so if you are spending, hours every day managing the sales process, going to a farmer's market, you can use the value of your time as your match. And then in the value added producer grant, you can also use the value of your commodity. So you can say, if I was to sell these tomatoes, wholesale at the market, I could make, this many dollars. Therefore, since I'm turning them into this value added product instead, I want to use the value of the tomatoes as part of my match.
Okay.
Yeah. I usually don't do that, actually, funnily enough, for the value added producer grant, because you get bonus points for using all cash. And here's the trick for value added is that you don't actually have to have access to it. As you could show like grandma's IRA, 401k, savings account and say, well, she has the cash. She's willing to say I have access to that money. So that's my match. And then it's a reimbursement basis. And so as long as you have enough cash flow to kind of like implement the project, really, like if you have 1 month's worth of expenses, then you can spend it and then you get reimbursed for half of it. And then you use that half to fund the next month and get reimbursed for half of it. Right. And so, or you can go to a bank. After you get a grant agreement signed, you can easily go to a bank and say, hey, here's the federal government. They've agreed to give me $250,000 over the next 3 years. Can I get a line of credit? And you can easily then get a line of credit that's sufficient to kind of float you through the program. And so that's kind of not everybody does that. It feels scary, I think, for a lot of people. But that's usually how I do it, because all of the value addeds that we've applied for, we've gotten, which is really nice. Not likely to continue, but I think that's part of the reason is because we can get bonus points from doing stuff like that. And it's much better to get the grant than to have it be too complicated and not get the award.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, and I loved how you were describing to set your business priorities and then figure out which grant really aligns with your business, so that not getting distracted by there's a lot of money here for this, I'm going to follow the money here, but really kind of having your vision set and figuring out how you can work within those parameters somewhat.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, okay, my last question, again, last call for questions, put them in the comments box. My last question is, how, if you are a little overwhelmed by the number of, there's so much money out there. If you're overwhelmed by that, you know, do you have any advice? How would you would you just kind of go back to that, figure out your priorities, and then?
Yeah, I would say reach out. I'm happy to chat and commiserate, right? There are a lot of choices. I'm happy to go through anybody's particular situation with them and just kind of see what we would recommend off the cuff. And then honestly, what I've seen the most success with clients is that here's all the most common thing that we end up doing is doing something like the value added producer grant, because that applies to most everybody who is currently being a producer. Because you can say like, oh, this is a Tennessee local tomato, and then it's considered a value added product, even if you're not turning it into some crazy product. It can be considered a local value added.
Really? Just the tomato?
Well, you have to market it as a local product, right? But if it's like, right, that's considered adding value. If you can get a better margin by marketing it and branding it as a sold locally, and you have to sell it within 400 miles, which I mean, 99% of people are doing that. Then that can be considered a value added product. So most
Wow.
people can qualify. I will usually go through something like that with people first because, like I said, cash flow, it's great, it's money in your pocket. We usually have to do a fair amount of work on the front end in order to get it done. But then after that's done, we understand the business. We understand like what are the next steps for the business? Where are you trying to go? And then it's far easier for us to make more specific recommendations, because that always is that challenge of like, how do you, starting from nothing, how do you
Mm-hmm.
know what's really going to be a good investment? It also is, I probably need to spend more time figuring out what's the best recommendation for people who don't already have a farm, right? Because a lot of people that we talk to are interested in moving into that. And there are funding, like there are loan programs through the USDA for people who want to buy land, start a farm, are new farmers. There aren't a lot of grants for brand new farmers, just because it's not a great investment for most people, right? Because so many people, like it's a really hard industry, right? You want people to be tied in first. You don't want to give them money to try something new. And so that's really the hard part, is that if you're not already doing something, then it's hard to get the grants for it. But starting small, right? Just starting something. And then if you have some kind of farm income, there are a lot of grants in here, like the DBII one, which was just for planning, for some kind of business that has to do with dairy, either producing, like you can do cows, sheep, goats, do your goat milk soap is very common. Like planning something, either production or processing. Value added does planning. So there are some grants that are available, but usually they still want to see that you already are starting something to be very competitive.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Did I answer
Okay.
your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for explaining that, because that was another question that I had, was for new and beginning farmers that don't already have something to show for, but are kind of trying to get off the ground. But you definitely just answered that one too.
I would still
Um,
say if that's your position, reach out, because I have come across resources where people have compiled like lists, right? They have like a PDF where it's just like 20 different resources for new and beginning farmers. And when I come across things like that, I'm trying to keep a hold of them. So I might have it somewhere, or at the very least, I'll put you on a list that when I come across it next time, we'll send it out and share it, because we're doing the work to find these resources all the time anyways. This is the circles that we're in. And so as much as we can just share those with people who would find it useful, we want to do that.
That's so amazing because it takes so much time to look for grants. So wow, what a gift. I think that that's it. All my questions. Thanks so much. I just can't, yeah, I'm super grateful. I feel like I learned so much. I probably will email you with more questions later. And thanks for sharing your contact info. If anybody has questions for Stephen, he just had his email up for a long time. So if you missed it, you can scroll back on the video and be sure to subscribe to both of our newsletters because there's lots of great things in both of them. Follow Stewards Unlimited on social media and see if you can win that $50 gift card. And I think that's all this stuff. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you again, Natalie, for hosting. This has been great. I've really enjoyed chatting.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See ya.